I'm Thomas from EFI International. Today I'm going to be talking about mistakes to avoid as a seller to increase and help increasing your business value. So what are we going to learn today? So the ultimate aim of this presentation and talk is, at the end of it, you should hopefully understand the factors that make a business sellable. So we're going to focus on three main things throughout the talk. So firstly, what do buyers want? What are the buyers in the market looking for? What are the kind of things that are important to them? What's maybe not so important to them? How to increase the value of your business before selling. Lots of people I speak to and deal with think about selling when it's too late. But one of the keys to being successful and getting as much as possible when you do sell your business is preparing well in advance. And also how to avoid common mistakes. We've done lots of deals now. We've seen what people do well and what people do not so well. So we're going to look at some example deals where they've been quite successful and looked at what they've done well, and then you can apply the same for things to not be doing. So firstly, who am I? So Thomas Smale, founded EFI International in 2010. My background was, I was at university, started buying and selling very small websites for myself. I didn't have a technical background, didn't really have any money, so I was very much getting started and figuring it out as I went along. Did quite well doing that for the first few years at university, just making a little bit of extra cash. Wrote an ebook about how to buy and sell websites and make profit from that. Off the back of that book, begun to build up a little bit of a name for being an expert in the industry. And then people started approaching me saying, hey Thomas, you've written this ebook about selling. It's great, but I don't want to do it myself. Can you do it for me? So that's how we ended up creating EFI International as it is now, which is a brokerage business. So we help people sell businesses. So a little bit about EFI International. Said we launched in 2010. We've completed just over 400 deals now, which is around 60 million in value, in sales price. We're growing about 80% year on year at the moment, probably just about hit 100% this year. We currently have a team of 22 and we're hiring more people all the time. Like I said, much like the majority of you in the room, we're 100% self-funded. We started from nowhere and we've consistently grown over the years. So 95%, like what is that number? Why is it significant? 95% is our sales success rate. So for every 100 deals we take on, we'll sell 95% of them. And probably one of the key drivers of that high success rate is the fact we spend a lot of time preparing people well in advance for a sale and making sure they understand a lot of things I'm going to be talking about today, what you should be like preparing, what's important, and what are buyers looking for. So hopefully if you can apply a lot of things I talk about today, you'll have a very high chance of selling a business, whether it's with us or whether it's somewhere else when you do get to that stage. So we're going to start with what do buyers want, what's the average buyer looking for, what are the kind of things we get asked about, what's important to them, what's not so important to them. So firstly, we'll look at what are the in-demand business models. I get a lot of questions from people saying, hey Thomas, I'm thinking of setting up a business, or I have multiple businesses. What business model should I be focusing on? What's popular? So I've put probably like our 5 most popular business models up here, and I'd say they're also in order of difficulty to start. So further down, slightly more difficult, and the further you go up, the easier they are to start. So at the top of the chain, we've got Amazon affiliate blogs. We do a lot of Amazon affiliate sites, particularly below $500,000 in valuation. They're relatively easy to get going. A lot of good training courses out there. Relatively low technical requirements, whether that's in terms of knowledge to get them started. They tend to be very popular, lots of buyers out there looking for them. And then we move on to AdSense, other affiliate sites. So there are lots of different affiliate programs out there. There's not just Amazon. A lot of people do start with Amazon just because low barrier to entry, easy to sell the products. But there are lots of other affiliate programs out there. AdSense sites, always popular too. And then in the middle, Amazon FBA stores. I know particularly with a lot of DC members, Amazon FBA is very popular, particularly over the last few years. We've seen more and more people come through with FBA businesses, and they're definitely becoming more and more popular, and I expect they will continue to do. And I would say generally slightly easier to set up and get off the ground than a regular e-commerce store, whether that's on Magento, Shopify, or one of the other popular e-commerce platforms. And then SaaS products and apps, probably what we're best known for as a company. We're like quite clear market leaders in the like sub $10 million space for selling a SaaS-based business. I've got that at the bottom of the list because it's generally the most technical business to start. A lot of you, like, I'm not a technical person, so I would definitely not start a SaaS business. And if you're not a technical person, I would definitely not recommend starting one. But if you do get one off the ground, they're generally one of the most in-demand business models we have. So what can we learn from successful sales? So every single business is unique, but businesses have a lot of similarities, particular businesses that we've sold that have been successful, and also deals that we turn away because they're not a good fit for us and we don't think they'll sell. We don't take on deals if we don't think they're going to be a good fit and they don't think they'll sell. And we'll often work with people to get their business to a position where it can be sold if it's not ready now. So this is like 3 example sites I've taken from the last 12 months at some slightly different size ranges that we deal with. So a $2 million site, a $680,000 site, and a $225,000 site. Obviously different sizes, different business models. In this particular case, the actual business model is slightly irrelevant. We're going to look at some factors that are important and 5 things that these businesses all had in common. So completely different business models, completely different sizes, but there were some things that these businesses all did. So the first one is they sold at the right time. This is an important one. A lot of people think about selling when it's too late. It's a reactionary decision. They might have something that comes up in their life that means they're forced to sell. But if you plan it and you sell at the right time, then you're going to be in a much better position than those who kind of last minute decision or like an emergency comes up that means they're forced to sell. All of these businesses were in an evergreen niche. So if you want to figure out if a niche is evergreen, look in Google Trends. Something that's like quite flat or ideally like growing over time. Don't build a niche around a short-term trend because it's not gonna be a sustainable business from a salability perspective. It might be profitable in the short term, but over a number of years, not so much. And buyers are always going to look at things like that. All of these businesses were consistently growing. So going back to selling at the right time, a lot of people think the best time to sell is when they've kind of hit the peak with their business. It starts to like flatline or maybe even started to decline slightly. But the best time is actually to sell while the business is still growing. That's when you're going to get a premium in the market, and that's what buyers are really looking for. Each of these businesses had different business models and different setups, but each of them had outsourced content or basic tasks within the business. So if it's an e-commerce business, it might be customer support. If it's a SaaS business, it might be development. If it's a content-based site, it might be content or SEO. And they'd also all plan for a sale. So sometimes there are things that come up that means you might be forced to accelerate a timeline or slow down a timeline. But all of them had thought about it in advance. They'd like looked at various content. They'd spoken to people about things to get ready. And we find the most successful sellers we deal with are often people that don't come to us on the day and say, hey, we want to sell our business now. They're people who come a year in advance and say, we're thinking about selling. What do I need to prepare? What's it worth now? What do I need to get ready to be in a position where I can sell? So one of the things we like to do at EFI International, we're very data driven, and we like to learn from other deals, whether it's in terms of things that have gone well or things that have gone not so well. So we're going to look at a few example deals we've done in the last quarter. So these are all Q2 deals. They're all confidential, so I can't give you the URLs and I can't give you exact numbers for all of them, but we can give you like an idea. So the first site is a dog food blog. And this is our CEO's dog in the office, like looking for food. So what's good about dog owners? Dog owners spend money. Dogs like to eat. If you've got squids running around the office, she'll come in, look for food. If there's nothing there, she'll run out again. So dog owners like to spend money. It's a great example of an evergreen niche. Dogs have been domesticated for thousands of years. People like spending money on their dogs, and they'll think about these things. It's also one of those niches that people often don't really think about. Kind of an example of a lot of the businesses we sell are often in relatively boring niches. Not really something you'd think about. Probably you don't want to tell your friends that you're on a blog about dog food, but often they are the most profitable businesses and the most consistent cash flow. So this was an authority website. So I would generally define an authority website as any blog or content site that has over 100 pieces of content on it. He used a pen name. You might call that a pseudonym or like a nickname on the site, so he hadn't got his real name behind the site. So there are some different ways you could go. You could go with the picture of the dog running the blog and like giving some tips. You could go with just like a fake name or a slightly different name, maybe a cartoon picture. It could be of a dog, could be of a person, whatever. Just think about your niche and think about your target market. Some people might not take like a cartoon picture very well. Maybe if you've got a blog about like personal finance or something like that, you probably want like a real person on that. Blog about dog food, dog owners would probably quite like a picture of a puppy, so maybe you can go with that. In this case, he outsourced content, so this is an example of something that's quite easy to outsource. It's relatively cost effective. A lot of the time, it's a relatively low value task for an owner to be doing. And if you want content on a consistent basis, then outsourcing it is really one of the best ways to do it. He also eventually outsourced SEO. So in the case of this site, and like with many businesses we sell, people set the business up themselves. They often don't have any funding, don't have any resources. So when they start out, they'll do a lot of them work themselves. So writing the initial content. If it's a content-based business, building the initial links, getting the fundamentals in place. Particularly if you build your business on something like WordPress, there's lots of like plugins out there that can help you build a kind of consistent process of posting new content. Did all the keyword research himself. With time, as he started to build momentum, he started to outsource a lot of those tasks, which meant that the growth can really start being kind of exponential when you're not doing everything yourself. Might cost a little bit of money, so you need to hit a certain level, but that's definitely something he did, and he begun to outsource those tasks. So SEO, content, all good ones to do. So this business was making $143,000 annual net profit when we sold it. So we're going to play a little game. Who can guess what this business sold for? Anyone? $500,000. Any other guesses?
400,000.
400. Any other guesses?
250. 20 times.
Okay, so sold for, can't give you the exact number, but in the 450 to 500,000 range. I'm going to go through a few more now. So with this particular business, like one of the keys of this business And if you can take like one thing away, was he really sold the business at the right time. So growing businesses really do sell for a premium. So they're multiple over 3 times annual, which is a really solid multiple compared to the averages. We'll look at some valuations slightly later on in the presentation. But for now, this is his revenue growth over time and his net profit over time, like consistently growing. A lot of people don't think about selling at that time, but if you want a premium for your business, then that really is the best time to sell.
How did he monetize it? Was it AdSense? Or
Various affiliate programs in there, including Amazon, but he had a couple ones in there. The key with this one as well, and I think with a lot of you, when it's your first business, a lot of people get very emotionally attached, which is very understandable, get why it happens. But he very much looked at this as a business decision. So he took the emotion out of play and looked at it in a very objective way. Like, what do I need to improve? What's going to make this more sellable? So you could take the ego out of the process. A lot of people might have their own name and their own face on their blog, and they go, well, it's my blog, I want everyone to know about me, I want to be famous. But that ultimately doesn't make something sellable. And the same with different tasks. He's like, well, I might be a great writer, which is fantastic, particularly if you're getting started. But if you ever want to sell your business, then that can be slightly more problematic. So letting go emotionally really is important. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's good to start a conversation way before you're ever thinking about selling, because there are a lot of things to think about, weigh up, and make sure you're in a position where, firstly, the business is ready to sell, but also you are ready to sell, which is definitely important. So the next business I'm going to use as an example is subscription box business. So over the years, this is quite a new business model for us. Haven't seen too many of these before. I've seen hundreds of possible businesses. People say, what's the best business to set up? Generally seen everything. I don't think there's necessarily a best or a worst business. There are some business models that are probably more in demand than others, but you should really be focusing on your strengths. So this particular business was an e-commerce store, had recurring monthly subscriptions. People signed up and they got a different level of box depending on what they were paying. It was in the yoga niche, so great thing about yoga, evergreen niche, but also growing consistently, and it's likely to be popular for many years to come. This particular seller had processes and systems for absolutely everything. He was very, very organized. He did do a lot of the tasks himself, particularly in the business when you start out. And when you start in your business, you really should be doing a lot yourself to kind of figure out what's the best way to do things, what's not the best way to do things. But he had written out processes and systems for absolutely everything, which meant that when he brought in outsourcers and like different team members to take over tasks, that he was in a kind of a great position. He didn't have to have a huge amount of involvement in the day-to-day. And when it came to selling, from a buyer perspective, that business was a lot more desirable than one where the owner does everything themselves and they'd never written anything down, which a lot of people do when they start out. So if you are thinking about selling in 6, 12, 24, or maybe never, then they're the kind of things you really should be doing. It's just going to help you grow your business, even if you're not necessarily going to sell it. So again, this business is making 423,000 annual net profit. I don't have the graph on here, but this business was relatively flat, so it wasn't necessarily growing that consistently. It's still going in the right direction, but relatively flat. He'd kind of grown it to the level he could.
So what was the business? What were you doing?
It was a subscription box business. Yeah.
For yoga?
Yeah, for yoga, yeah.
Okay.
So does anyone want to have a guess what this business sold for?
2 million? 1 million. 1.3.
Ooh, that's a good guess. So it's in the 1.3 to $1.5 million range. So there's lots of like fundamentals and lots of things that are common across every business we sell, but there are always exceptions. You don't have to tick There's not like there's a perfect checklist. If you follow and do all of these things, your business will definitely sell, and vice versa. You could have a business not really tick that many boxes, and there'll be someone who wants to buy your business. So we've done a lot of deals, and there are definitely some exceptions in there. So a recent deal we did was called Drip, that many of you might have heard of. It's a marketing automation tool, mainly for email marketing, like list building. This particular business was a SaaS business, which we're probably best known for. It was started by Rob Walling, who many of you may know, and Derek Reamer, his business partner. This business had multiple features on big sites. It'd been mentioned everywhere. The great thing about this particular product is people would write blog posts about how to make the most of Drip, how to make like more money using Drip. So there's effectively free marketing, and as they like built up more and more momentum, there are more and more people talking about the product. And from a buyer perspective, that makes that a very desirable business, because that's money can't buy marketing. So if you do have a business that gets to that stage and people are talking about you, then it's probably going to be very desirable to buyers. They don't just look at numbers, they want to look at other signals and like positive signals that are important. For SaaS businesses, this obviously won't apply to everything out there. Had a low churn rate, and one of the factors in SaaS business valuation that's very important is the rate of churn, whether that's customer or revenue churn. This business had 7 figures in revenue when it sold. Again, I can't give you the exact number, but it's in the 7-figure range. And it attracted big buyers. We eventually sold the company to a business called Lead Pages, that many of you have probably heard of or may even be customers of. But this business was different from a lot of the ones we do, because it didn't necessarily tick all of the boxes. It still had an owner involved in the business quite consistently. But it did have a lot of similarities with the variables we're talking about. So growth-wise was key. And even though the business was continuing to grow and had done for a number of years, they were approached and ended up taking like a really good deal. And that deal would have been nowhere near as good if the business had stopped growing. So does anyone want to have a guess for what this business sold for?
6 million.
Any other guesses? So I can't tell you, but it was it was a good deal, and I would say that was a good example of an exception. There are some things in that business that made it very desirable to a bigger acquirer. So you don't necessarily have to be ticking all the boxes. Buyers will often look at things that others won't. On the open market, maybe that business would have been worth less. So what's my business worth? One of the most common questions I get from people when I'm at events or like emails we get hundreds of thousands of inquiries a month about valuation in general. So I'm just going to go through some of the different things we look at. We've already gone over some example deals. We'll just look at like some of the different variables that come into play. So firstly, one definition that's quite important to understand is SDE. You might often see this also called SDC. So seller discretionary earnings or seller discretionary cash flow, both pretty much interchangeable terms. So that effectively is the net profit of the business, adding back any discretionary costs. So discretionary costs for anything personal related to the business. So as an owner, that's things like your salary, like healthcare, pension, any costs in there that are related to you or things that you've spent money on that aren't necessarily key to running the business. And the reason that's an important differentiation is often for tax reasons and various other reasons, people try to run their business on the books, the profit as low as possible. Obviously, like less profit, pay less tax. So you'll often make a bunch of deductions in the business. But when it comes to selling, obviously you want to maximize your profit. So instead of stopping paying yourself stopping like your healthcare, stopping pension contributions and all of that. To avoid that, we make an adjustment, which means we add back any of those costs. And that also means that two equivalent businesses where one owner might be taking 100,000 a year and one might be taking 250,000 a year is worth exactly the same, because ultimately they're doing the same thing and you can really dictate what you get paid. So it's a very standardized measure. So similar to net profit, but not including any income you take yourself. So a little bit about our EFI International Valuation model. So this is a tool we use internally to value businesses. So it's based on proprietary data. So we're a very data-driven firm. We track data on absolutely everything we do. Every deal we do, we look at tons of different variables. So our model has about over 400 deals we completed, lots of different data points from all these deals, which means that we have over 20,000 data points that we look at when we're valuing a business. We hired a team from MIT, so we have an office in Boston. Hired a team from MIT to help us build out a model which looks at behind the scenes. It's extremely complicated, but pulls in tons of different factors. That means when we look at a business and the different variables in there, we can figure out what it's worth to a very high degree of accuracy. And just to give you an idea where valuations come out, so like I said, businesses sell on a multiple of seller discretionary earnings. You'll often see it simplified to net profit, but there is quite a clear distinction, so it's important to understand that definition. So these are the three different business models we focus on, so SaaS businesses, content businesses, and e-commerce businesses. There's no like set range. A lot of people think that valuing a business is as simple as saying it's a SaaS business, it's worth 4 times, it's content, it's worth 2 times, but there are thousands, hundreds of variables when it comes to valuation, so there's no like set number. To give you an idea of ranges, SaaS businesses tend to sell in the 3 to 6 times annual FTE range. Content and e-commerce businesses are very similar, so 2 to 4 times annual is a common range for those. There are exceptions to the rule. We have some that will go higher than that, some that will go lower, but that's a pretty good range to expect. So we'll go into some Q&A shortly, but just some like takeaways I'd like you all to go away with. So this is probably one of the key ones. I'll put this at the top because I think it's one of the most important things and something that a lot of people really don't think about. You should really sell while your business is still growing. It might seem counterintuitive. You might only really want to sell once it started to decline or whatever. But if you really want to get a premium multiple and attract multiple buyers, then if that business is still growing, then that's a good thing. And if you do that, you're going to attract a premium multiple. Buyers are really looking for growth businesses. They'll pay a higher multiple for a business that's growing versus a business that is not growing so much. Recurring income attracts a premium. So we saw SaaS businesses sell for 3 to 6 times, content and e-commerce sell for 2 to 4. Part of the reason for that is the fact they've got recurring income in there. So depending on your business model, there might be opportunities to build in recurring income. So with SaaS, it's very common to have a recurring monthly subscription. E-commerce, the subscription box business was popular and sold for a premium multiple, and that's because they had the monthly plans in there, people paying. If you have an affiliate business, it is a little bit more difficult, but there are some out there that might pay you a residual or monthly commission for anything you refer. So if you can build that in, then it's very powerful when it comes to selling, and it's definitely a factor that increases valuation and saleability. So outsourcing is the next thing. When you start out, it's very unrealistic for me to stand here and say everything should be outsourced, you shouldn't have any involvement. the vast majority of people we deal with started their business by themselves, or maybe with a partner or a couple of partners, did a lot of the work themselves when they started out. As you grow, the more and more money you make, and the more and more time you're spending on the business, it's really important to start outsourcing key tasks. From a buyer perspective, the more you have outsourced, the less time you're spending on the business, the more replaceable you are, and the more that business can be sold for. So I would always suggest outsourcing the things that are either easiest to outsource, take you the most time, or you're not very good at. So for a lot of people, for me, for example, I'm not the best writer in the world, so I would outsource content. You might be really bad with numbers, you might want to outsource your financials, which is like one of the next things on the list. A lot of sellers come to us and they say, hey Thomas, we want to get a valuation for our business, can you tell me what it's worth? How sellable is it? But without financials, it's very difficult to know that. It's impossible to value a business without the financials, and it's also impossible to figure out what the best time to sell is. If you don't know if your business is growing or not, you don't know how profitable it is, then you're really just going to be guessing. So documenting your financials as you go along, whether that's yourself or if you want to outsource that as a task, it's really quite important. Always kind of surprises me how many small business owners don't really keep track of their numbers very well, but the more you can track it, even if you find it quite boring, is like really quite important. Then don't be reliant on yourself. When you start out, all businesses are reliant on the owner. It's definitely something that's unavoidable. So build in systems and processes that you're doing as you go along. You don't necessarily have to have everything outsourced. It's not realistic for every business. But the less the business is reliant on you, the more it's going to be worth and the more desirable it is going to be to different buyers. Another thing, like I said, there's no automated way to do a valuation. There's not a set number that you just multiply to get an estimate. So it always makes sense to speak to a broker. The vast majority of brokers will value businesses for free. There's usually no obligation to go through that process. So you may look at some of the valuation ranges and say, well, that's quite high, that's quite low. But it's best to speak to someone, find out where you are in that range, because they can be quite a big difference between like 3 to 6 times. That could be a $1 million business, it could be a $2 million business. So there's no real way to automate that process. So we're going to some Q&A now. Before we do that, I've got a free course on exit planning you can access at efiinternational.com/DCBKK-2016. Yep, so SlideShare next up. So go to SlideShare account. Hopefully they're there by now. If not, they'll be up shortly after the presentation. You'll find them on my profile there. My direct email is thomas@efiinternational.com. If you want to buy me a beer, unfortunately we can't do that today. In person would be great. Cool, so let's go into some Q&A now. Thank you.